The best Pokemon fan game. I'm sure you've seen this statement plastered over all sorts of YouTube video titles. While it's something that a lot of YouTubers do that kind of annoys me, I thought I'd finally ask myself the question, what actually is the best Pokemon fan game? I'll be honest, I don't really like to compare fan projects, as they're usually made by people who don't really care to make the best game ever, rather a cool game that they would enjoy playing themselves. But since this scene is so oversaturated with people calling every new project the best, I wanted to take an objective look at what actually is the best, and I have three contenders. Three fan projects that go above and beyond to create experiences that can be enjoyed by almost any fan of the Pokemon series. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Whether you've played a ton of fan games or not, I'm sure you've absolutely heard of this one. It's an immensely popular fan game that allows you to fuse any two Pokemon, combining their movesets, types, and ability options. While this sounds amazing, I'm sure you're wondering why I would consider Infinite Fusion to be the best Pokemon fan game over something like Unbound or Xenoverse. First of all, I think a lot of people, including myself at one point, underestimate the limitless possibilities of this game. There are over 150,000 different fusion combinations. Combine that with the game's various randomizer options, it's safe to say you could run 1,000 different playthroughs and always have a unique team. This is great for people like me, who sometimes get tired of using the same official and canon Pokemon after so many years. But the gameplay doesn't stop at fusions. With 2.5 regions to explore, this game is jam-packed with content. The only thing missing is a big story, but my philosophy on storytelling in Pokemon games is that I either want a good story or an almost non-existent one. Although I'm sure everyone watching has probably played or even heard of this game, so I won't ramble on about any more of the game's core features. But an important part of Infinite Fusion is its development. The game isn't just handled by a team of a couple people, it has a ginormous community of spriters providing tens of thousands of custom fusion sprites, and some of them really are top tier. Like, I wouldn't blame you for playing this game just to look at the cool fusion sprites. And that's really why I consider this game to be a contender for the best Pokemon fan game, because it's not just a game. It's a massive community project with hundreds and maybe even thousands of contributors. Okay, so I'll admit, I had some trouble looking for a number 2 spot. I wanted to find something that really innovated on the Pokemon IP, but not in a way that made it more inaccessible to a larger audience. And after a lot of thinking, I decided to settle with Pokerogue. Now before you click off this video with the thought in your mind, just because something is super popular doesn't mean it's super good. Trust me, I agree, but things become super popular for a reason. Pokorogue has two insanely big things going for it. First of all, you can play this game anywhere. On your personal PC, your laptop, your school computer, your work computer, your phone. Yes, if you weren't aware, this game is both browser-based and mobile compatible. The second selling point is the gameplay. Pokemon's mix of exploration and battles has always been fun, but sometimes you just want to battle. And that's what Pokorogue is, just battling. You can play the game for hours or even just 5 minutes at a time, and still feel like you made decent progress. But obviously, this game can't just be endless battles. That would get boring very quickly, and the hype would have probably died within a month. There are a lot of different gimmicky features that spice up each run. Now, even though Pokorogue might not look spectacular to a lot of people, it certainly is innovative. And having gained over 1 million unique players in less than 6 months, I really can't wait to see what it looks like in a few years from now. Last but not least, I think Pokorogue is objectively the most accessible Pokemon fan game. You don't have to download an emulator, patch a ROM, or even unzip a bunch of files. This might not sound like that big of a deal, but there are a lot of tech-illiterate fans in the community, and that shouldn't dictate whether or not they should be able to enjoy fan games. The last game is pretty different from the first two. It hasn't received nearly as much content creator coverage as Infinite Fusion or Pokorogue, nor was it considered super casual player friendly just a few years ago. But I genuinely believe that this game is the most impressive piece of Pokemon fan content ever created. Rejuvenation is my final contender for the title of the best Pokemon fan game. Before I picked this game up for the first time almost 6 years ago, My most positive experience with fan games were projects like Insurgents, Glazed, and Uranium. All of these titles added a bunch of new things to the Pokemon experience, and as a hyper-fixated teenager, I couldn't get enough of them. But at the end of the day, they still felt like the same Pokemon experience I was used to. Other than a few dark and somewhat mature moments, these felt like titles that Game Freak would cook up in an alternate universe. But Rejuvenation was different. My first playthrough of the game was probably the most fun I've ever had playing Pokemon. It opened my eyes to what could really be done with the IP when put into the hands of someone with infinite ideas. I was forced to use Pokemon I had never thought of using before. I cooked up battle strategies that most fan games would have never required. While the story was darker and more mature, it never reached a level of uncomfortability. Speaking of the story, it's massive. Even with the speed up enabled, you'll spend at least 100 hours progressing through the plot. And that's just the main story. There are a plethora of very interactive side quests. Some of them are very simple, while others show you pieces of the game's lore you probably would have missed otherwise. Now back to what I first opened with, on how this game was originally inaccessible to many casual players a few years ago. With the most recent update, that's no longer a problem. You see, despite having a casual difficulty mode, it was admittedly harder than most, if not all, mainline Pokemon games. But with the new feature called Passwords, the game's difficulty is a lot more customizable. Rejuvenation, now more than ever, feels like a game for every Pokemon fan, and in my opinion, one that every fan should play. But before I end this video, I wanted to answer the question of why these games? There are a ton of other fan games and ROM hacks that have been praised to a higher extent, but objectively speaking, a lot of those games are just missing something. Pokemon Unbound, despite its incredible quality of life and technical improvements, puts a lot of focus on a story that just isn't very interesting. Pokemon Xenoverse, despite its graphical appeal, lacks a consistently challenging experience. I could go on forever, but at the end of the day, these aren't bad games. In fact, they're absolutely incredible ones. Not every fan game or ROM hack needs to be for everyone, but I feel like the three I listed do a great job of offering a pleasant experience no matter what kind of fan you are. Just because I think these games are better than others doesn't mean you need to agree with me, or feel bad about the ones you like the most. If Pokemon Insurgents is your favorite fan game ever, then don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. And of course, have a nice rest of your day.